There's really only one way to begin a series about the anime video nasties of the late 1980s and early 1990s. A single name that towers above all others in terms of its sheer infamy. Its star has faded a little bit in recent years, but the mere mention is still enough to make dogs howl and to make young children cry and vomit. I am of course talking about Super Moe Waifu-chan, but because even I couldn't make it through that one, we're going to start instead with 1989's Urotsukidōji, Legend of the Overfiend. We are here at the iconic Kelvin Grove to await the coming of the Weejin, the prophesied being who we hope will reunite the Bucky drinkers with the people who'd rather have Iron Brew. The story begins in 1980s Osaka at the Myojin University, or possibly high school depending on where you read, where basketball ace Ozaki impresses the girls with his skills on the court, while Nebushi no-hoper Nagamo pervs on them in the changing rooms. Unbeknownst to either of them, the oddball newcomer hanging around in the background is Amano Jaku, a half-man, half-beast who suspects Ozaki is the prime candidate in his 300-year search for prophesied messiah. The coming of this Shojin will unite the world of the humans with that of the man-beasts in a new era of harmony, and Amano wants to be the one who finds him. Unfortunately, there also exists a third race, the demonic Majin, who do not want their realm of dark pleasures to be dragged into this union, and will go to any lengths to kill the Shojin before it can take place. Although the film has its fair share of high-profile champions, I came into this one with pretty low expectations. Even in its 1 hour 45 minute theatrical cut, it's still a pretty gruelling watch. Not so much because of the copious amounts of gory violence, but more because of the regular leering scenes of violent rape. This is a vision of the apocalypse that pulls no punches, in a film that is trying its very hardest to offend you. If you can deal with that though, it's unexpectedly sophisticated and surprisingly compelling in its storytelling, milking its ultra-nihilistic worldview for everything it's worth. Take the rape out of the equation and it even makes some interesting use of its sexually charged subject matter, developing this weirdly Freudian fixation with monstrous genital imagery and horrific manifestations of its character's repressed sexual desire. No character with any significant role in the film is particularly likeable, but it's hard not to feel at least some sympathy given the awful events that they are thrust into. Most intriguingly, the film has no real hero either. Amano is about as close as we get, but even he is too wrapped up in his own vainglorious quest to care about the plight of those around him until he too is dragged into it. Visually, I have heard one reviewer whose name may or may not rhyme with Sob Bamurai describe the film as beautiful. Now, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but I feel in Urotsukidōji the eye of the beholder is more likely to be inserted somewhere unspeakable. Even if it's not the best looking production of its time though, it has aged pretty well. The gore effects are rather impressive, and while credited as the man who made the film as extreme as it is, director Hideki Takayama shows definite flair with action scenes, having worked on cult FMV games Road Avenger and Cobra Command just a couple of years prior. The H.R. Geiger-esque creature design is also particularly memorable, being gooey and visceral in a way that contemporary anime like Tokyo Ghoul and Parasite just aren't. Nevertheless, I don't want to build this film up too much. By the time the third act rolls around, it becomes little more than a shit hitting the fan montage, a cheap attempt to pad things out with scenes of shock horror as we build towards a conclusion that never comes. Had I been at all invested in the characters, I might have cared more, but as it was, I was just a bit fed up. To make matters worse, this is a compilation film, distilled down from 3 parts of a much longer series, and it suffers all the problems you would associate with that. It's episodic, it's difficult to keep track of who the minor characters are, and it simply feels forced into a format for which it was never intended. So why then, you might be asking, did I watch this version? Prior to making this review, I actually understood this one to be the most coherent in terms of its storytelling, with a few additional scenes inserted in for the sake of the plot, and cuts made only to the sex and violence. Everything I've read and heard subsequently, however, has disputed this, with the general consensus being that the best way to see Urotsukidōji is the 3-part original. In fact, if there's sufficient interest, I may even come back and do a follow-up video exploring the differences between each version. In the meantime, it's been an experience. Legend of the Overfiend is not for the faint of heart or the easily offended, and if you come into it expecting something a bit special, you might be disappointed. Yet its brutal brand of storytelling still feels potent and fresh, even if you really have to work at it to get the best out of it. Don't approach it as a work of art, but come at it instead as a bit of B-movie grade exploitation that occasionally transcends its means, and you might just be pleasantly surprised.